The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, help me welcome Joseph Cole. Joe, you're from Ward 5 and you're running for the legislature.
Yep, I would like to thank Mr. Carl Seidel for welcoming me here today. He has been a relatively nice person to me while I've been fumbling about with this election.
Well, how do you like your campaign so far? How's it going?
I want to plead the fifth on that one.
All right. You did have something you wanted to tell us, though, by why you signed up to run. And can you tell me?
So one of the things that started right before I was starting to run, I watched a video saying that for the federal government that there is they only make 70% of GDP every year. And so the first thing I did was like, hey, I can't really say that about New Hampshire without grabbing New Hampshire data and running it back through to say, hey, for New Hampshire, it's actually 5.5%, not 17%, which is what I did. And so in turn, it became increasingly obvious that the great New Hampshire advantage that everyone talks about is actually not from the not having income tax. It's actually the not having the income tax compliance, because all that effort into avoiding the income tax, we don't have to do any of that, which means we can spend all that effort doing more important things like doing business, goofing off, running a campaign, being awesome like Carl Seidel, being awesome like the interviewers and this organization here. And so in turn, because we don't have to, it's the same with the sales tax as well. And so it's all the tax compliance that actually
takes a lot of the effort.
It takes a chunk, and not even a lot of effort necessarily. It's that it takes effort that could be used more productively elsewhere that we don't have to as New Hampshire citizens.
Mm-hmm. So this is the thing that you think you want to contribute to.
Yes, and so in turn, it become increasingly obvious to me that since GDP will be going down, because even though I believe that the statistic that I'm basing it off of is a tailing indicator, the GDP of New Hampshire has gone down due to the COVID lockdowns. I don't kid myself. I'm not even going to go looking back at how necessary they were, because I didn't know, and I wasn't involved in the governmental process of that. But in turn, it's becoming increasingly obvious that though whether or not they were necessary is irrelevant to me, it's that now that we've done them, that there will be less tax revenue because there's been less work done.
Right.
And because there's been going to be less tax revenue, that means there's going to be less things being done by the government unless they hate clones. And in turn, that means the very important question, if you know the government's going to have to do less, who do you want to run the government that has to do less? The person who has spent the last decades saying that we should have limited government, we should do less, and built their entire platform on doing exactly that? Or the opposition who says we want the government to do more, tax and spend, when in fact, increasing the taxes does not increase tax revenue. It's increasing the productivity of the citizens. And so just saying we want to increase tax revenue by increasing taxes does not compute. And so in turn, it's like, they should vote for us, because in this situation, everyone should know that because there's less jobs and less productivity, there needs to be less governmental interference, so that because there's going to be less money.
So you saw that's the way you think anyway, and you wanted to see the government to be more leaner and maybe more productive.
Well, it would be convenient if the government was leaner, because then we could do more with less. It would technically be working with the same amount of money, but technically we would be being more productive in turn, because we'd be more efficient about it.
Well, that's what the Republicans have been trying to do for all the time that they've been up there. I've served 4 terms up there, and I saw that it was necessary to make sure the organization is effective and efficient. And that kept our taxes low, And we found out that the more productive the less interference that we had with our economy, that the more money we got, which was something that a lot of people didn't think, because we were producing more, and therefore the normal taxes that was for a larger amount of income. So now you were getting more money to do the things that the government was good at doing. But you had to look at it that way. And I think that attitude is something that we need up there at the legislature, because what we have there is two different factions now. That one wants to be lean and mean, if you will, and the other one who wants to be spend and tax and spend. And
so two comments I want to tell you were saying.
Yeah.
So the first thing is that I'm so pleased that it's not just me, and that other people can reach the same conclusions as me. And so that sort of thing, like, hey, it's sort of like, if I say something and you say something, it's like, we came from different places, but we reached the same conclusion. That's much more valuable than everyone's being from on high seeing said, hey, you should say something, and this is what's right, without having, like, confirmation from other ways of going about it. Like, if somebody says that as an authority that this is how it should be, without actually saying, like, why they came to this conclusion, there's no way to evaluate it. And so the other thing was that I almost feel like the people who want to tax and spend, because I know that the tax increases don't work, it's just, if they want to crush what we have, because if the tax increases go up and if they make the same amount of money, that means that whatever their tax increases go up on, there'll be less of it. So when the property taxes go up, for example, then there'll be less new property and it'll start being broken up or something. And the same for business taxes. And when the business taxes go up, that becomes less new business. And so in turn, the other half is the spend, is that if there's less alternatives to the people who are spending to the money comes to the government, that means they're basically being a tyrannical organization, because there's no alternative. They just you have to kneel to the state or else, if that makes sense.
Well, it's you want to have your people enjoy living in the state, and they want to have an effective use of their money. And I think that's one of the attitudes that not enough people have. I don't know. I still haven't, all the time I've spent up there, haven't understood where some people think their money comes from. It comes from all the people here. That's and you take it away because they can use it more effectively than the government most of the time.
Well, the using it more effectively is actually a much more of a informational problem. So in economics, one of the things that they talk about is that even if you bring all the power to centralize it economically, the problem is that you don't have perfect information. And even if you do, you have no way of processing it fast enough. So in turn, what happens is that you have to make a heuristic guess about the best way to spend all the money. And in turn, because you're basically making a guess, you're guaranteed to be wrong on the individual level. So in turn, it's actually not that it's absolutely wrong, but on an individual level, there's a difference between what the person wanted and what the person got, or vice versa, where the person wanted this and got this. And that basically, in turn, if you know that there's an informational problem, and the best way to letting the person is letting the power flow back to the citizens, because you know what's best for you, and I know what's best for me, and the TV crew knows best for them, and the person who's watching this knows what's best for them, is what those people watching. Obviously, the person, if they have the most power over themselves with having like the ability to choose what they need with their dollars, then in turn, obviously, like for example, like with the masks, like my family bought a mask. And so they determined that they needed a mask for us. And so they built and stitched me a yellow mask to match my yellow shirt. And so in turn, my family valued having a mask. And so in turn, we spent our money getting a good mask. And so the same, and you, on the other hand, have a much more garden variety mask, I noticed earlier, which we don't have to prove, by the way. And so in turn, you decided, instead of spending money on having a good mask, you bought a garden variety mask and spent your money elsewhere on more important things to you. And the same with our constituents is that if you have power over your money, you have power over, it's basically a mechanism to have power over your destiny. And thereby, on the other hand, if people take away your options to get money and dictate your money to you, like being on welfare and how it can be used, then they've basically taken your destiny away from you.
That's a good perspective of that, because people in New England and New Hampshire particularly want to live the way they want to live.
To live free or die.
Yeah, and that is something that government doesn't look at, because government thinks that one way of doing things is the best way. But
Well, the government thinks they know best. And I actually disagree with you on the one way. Actually, there's lots of caveats and asterisks to the entire process, to be honest, that have accreted over time. But in turn, it's very hard, makes it, all those asterisks and caveats make it much harder to navigate. Like, for example, I'm on SSI. And it turns out if you're on SSI, you're not allowed to have more than $2,000 on your hand. So basically, every month, I have to take money on my account, pay my rent, pay my student loans, which we may or may not get to. I went to college and graduated. And then the rest of it I have to squander because I'm not allowed to have over $2,000. Yeah, let that sink in, that I have to literally squander money because I'm not allowed to keep it. I may be the most, I mean, I don't have a lot left over, to be honest, but I have to squander all of it, because if I don't, or spend it on whatever I want, but I have to spend it. I'm not allowed to save it. I'm not allowed to say, hey, if I save this up, I can get something big. I can make an investment. I can make a business. I can do things. But since I'm on SSI, I can't have more than $2,000. And so I have to squander it. Not necessarily squander it, but I have to spend it.
Yeah.
So if I have something productive, I can spend it on something productive. But otherwise, it has to be spent anyways. I'm like, it's things like that where it's like,
Why?
I know why they're doing it, because they don't want people who are extremely wealthy being on welfare.
Right.
On the other hand, for me, it's like, hey, I've been efficient and I can't take advantage of being efficient while being on welfare. And then there's the other hard part about being on welfare is that you have to actually, when you're jumping out of welfare, you have to really jump out because I have to do absolutely nothing. And I get a check every month, meaning I can do basically whatever I want. If I get a job, I have to spend my time doing something else. And then SSI decided that they want to do a clawback against my money.
Oh, really?
And the leftover money that that I have to squander, they're doing a clawback against that I don't get to keep it. Well, at least my college and my rent's paid, so that's good. But meaning I'm not going to go homeless because I need to do a clawback. And I'm not being affected any of my loans, because note that the coronavirus has blocked interest on my loans. I actually knocked one of them out because of the relief. I'll just change it. So in turn, at least I don't have to squander as aggressively because note that I spent most of my paycheck on my loans.
Well, that kind of experience might be eye-opening for a few people up there. They may not even know that's the way it works.
Like, that's why the welfare is typically called a trap.
Yeah.
It's because I'm literally sitting here saying, hey, I have two bills, my rent, which includes food, and my student loans, which I don't have to pay for because of coronavirus. So I paid for it anyways because I have to pay it. I have to spend it out anyways. And so if I would get to keep more of the leftover money if I didn't have the loans, I get more money to squander. Let that sink in. Story of my life.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at welfare that I know I wouldn't have thought was in place. Just, as you say, it's a trap. Like you're keeping at that level and you never get enough to save and go rent a house or apartment someplace else or buy a car. And, how do you save for those things?
Well, technically, I am allowed to save, but I'm not allowed to save more than have at maximum at any one time more than $2,000.
Well, what do you get for $2,000 nowadays? Not too much.
Well, that's the entire thing about. So one of the things that I reading Hazlitt's book, and it was like previously, before reading the book, they was actually talking. I thought that having inflation was good because it would push down the minimum wage. Because if it pushed down the minimum wage, everyone would say, "Hey, the minimum wage is actually dumb," and it is. And basically, once the inflation was bad enough, everyone would be off of it. In turn, it turns out that inflation actually attacks the person on minimum wage. And it turns out that it actually just makes things worse for the exact same reason that it basically is moving the goalposts for everyone. So that's why which is why maybe, as a thought, that maybe the 2000 should be cost of living adjusted to,
But it isn't. Then the time to get the legislature to get something, it's 2 years later, then you want it, you start thinking about it.
Well, that would be if it was like the post office, where the stamps you have to start raising the price of the stamps because it takes that long.
Right. Well, it sounds like you know a few of the problems that they have there in the legislature. And
But even in the worst part, I was saying that with the SSI's maximum amount of money you're allowed to have under it needs a cost of living adjustment, is eventually the cost of living adjustment will be so high that everyone can be on SSI. Which defeats the purpose. It would basically be a UBI at that point.
Yeah.
Which would be great, because at least it'd be better than the current finagling, because if it was a UBI, at least that there'd be no government control over it.
You think that's going to happen?
Well, no. The people who the people being in poverty like their control way too much, to be honest.
That's the way you see it now.
Well, they're basically I need to stop saying that word. So for those who are thinking that they're trying to help people with the welfare system, you have to know that certain parts of the Democratic Party, I wouldn't like to say that the base really understands this all that well, but certain people at the Democratic Party know that if they provide money and trap people in the system and say the other party, the Republicans, want to take the system away from them, then they will have nothing because they've spent their time sitting on their bum,
right,
not getting skills. I mean, I went to college. I gained skills. So in the worst case scenario for me, I actually have to just buckle down and try to get a job. And so for them, those who have not been putting in the legwork to get better,
right,
are basically have neither the welfare nor anything. So they're basically being blackmailed into voting for the democratic welfare system, because if they don't have it,
they don't have anything.
They don't have anything. Which is why the democratic welfare system needs to be actually, most people say that it needs to be cut entirely. And at a fundamental level, while that may be a true long-term goal, at a practical position, it's not it would do more harm than good to rip it all out. It needs to be wound down. The systems need to phase out at a fundamental level, if that makes sense. Because if somebody is on welfare and says, if you cut them, they have nothing. But if you wean them off of the need of welfare.
Yeah. If you can. Do you have any ideas that you want to throw out there at the legislature? See if they bite on it?
So one of the things that I've been omitted by is that in New Hampshire, there is a clause that they say that you want you to work to be on Medicaid, which I'm also on. I'm on with the healthcare. To be honest, that one, I only got both of them because in 2008, I was 18, eating insurance, and my parents had no way of paying for it. And so they said, go on the public dole to avoid the even bigger Obamacare fine. Thank Republicans for removing that fine. So technically, I could just be off of it if I was okay with losing the cash benefits, which I'm currently using to run the entire operation between my rent and in addition to my SSI. So in turn, it's increasingly obvious to me that the first thing we need to do is that we need to actually increase the number of jobs in New Hampshire. And that seems counterintuitive, is that's how we fix welfare. Is that if we increase the number of jobs, then there becomes a competition for labor. And if there becomes a competition for labor, say that, so one of the things that House was talking about is that say that this is how much value you get from the welfare. You have to actually be this value above it from here to here has to be great enough that this work here the work above has to be worth the additional aggravation of the new money.
Right.
And so in turn, what I'm saying is that if we have more jobs, it'll work both ways, is that because there'll be more productivity, there'll be more money so that we can help people get out of the system. On the other hand, because there'll be more jobs,
transition.
because there'll be more jobs, there'll actually be places for you to get into.
Right.
So even if worse comes to worse, like at a fundamental level, most people don't stay at minimum wage. Most people over the course of their career make more money because they get more skills.
I would think so. And that's what you want to do, is help them along that path.
Yep. And so if we have more jobs, we can say, hey, you get the skills here. And over time, we'll have a highly skilled population of workers. And so that's one of the big advantages of Mass, and why Mass has much more money than we do, is that they have the brainchild of the MIT college groups. And so because of all of them creating businesses in Mass, they have all that business and productivity as their base that we don't.
Do you see us getting that, though? With more companies and more schools here?
I believe that over time, that the Mass tax structure is limiting them. Basically, they have this brainchild organization that sort of functions, but over time, they sort of flow into, some people want to move in New Hampshire because of the lower taxes. And then because of how remoteness works, they move to New Hampshire, and if they build using limited liability corporations. Because one of the things that really, really nasty about Mass taxes for the people watching this is that the Mass taxes for income is based off of your total income, which means that if you work in New Hampshire and work in Mass, you have to pay the income tax for both halves. So you have to pay income tax for both New Hampshire stuff and Mass stuff until the new year rolls around. And if your entire business is encapsulated in New Hampshire, you no longer have to pay Mass tax. So one of my constituents I was talking to was actually talking about that exact thing. It's like, hey, so when the tax cutoff hits, I will get a pay raise because I will no longer have to pay Mass tax while I'm working remotely.
Right.
And it's things like that where it's like the high tax rates and the high tax compliance hurts the people who it affects. And the moment they're out of it, they have more money, they can do what they want with their money, and because they can do what they want, they can make actually incredibly poor decisions. But if they make a decision and they live with the decision and they don't get bailed out or anything, they learn to become wiser. Because, I mean, you didn't get bailed out that often, did you? And so because they became wiser, they become much better citizens.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I knew about New Hampshire is that I heard about the New Hampshire income tax, but I didn't realize why. And I actually, while sitting out at the polls with my sign, sitting next to Allison Nutting Wong, the honored person of the Senate, no, it's a state rep, she's state rep, is that I discovered that they were trying to do it to help for family leave. And so that leaves two parts. One is the putting money aside for that. And if you just kept the money from your income tax, you could do that on your own.
That's right.
And the other part was being rehired, because if you do pay family leave as part of the law and they can't fire you because of it, obviously the other part is that basically they have to take an efficiency cut because you're not giving them value and working for them and doing absolutely nothing. Because you have to pay money into the income tax, they're not directly paying economically with cash, they're paying in economic loss productivity. And so in turn, there becomes two parts. So the first part is the income tax, which if you wanted to, you could save up and do this on your own, assuming you're not on SSI, which we've already talked about. And the other part is the being rehired. And so that in turn means that you could just do that by talking to the person. And as I'm saying this to Mrs. Nutting Wong, and she doesn't comprehend, like, this would just be better for everyone because we wouldn't have to think about it. Answer is yes, you'd have to think about it because now, but that's the entire point of being a state rep, is that you think about the consequences of this, which is why I'm saying this, is that neither of this is necessary, but it's actually adding regulatory burden to the businesses to actually have to be able to hold somebody who's not working for you on retainer and being able to, once they're done, giving their position back. Basically, it's the same as the veterans returning, which I'm not sure how often that happens anymore. I'm assuming it happened more often previously when
Well, they do that when they have a lot of the people that are on,
the draft.
yeah, not the draft I'm talking about, is when they go out for 2 weeks in the summer or something,
Yep.
they have to do that. And the company has to keep them all around that 2 week tour of whatever they have to do.
Yep.
And but the leave again is a one thing fits all. And you really don't need that for everybody. Some
Nope.
people have.
So that means that the people who don't need leave are now funding the people who do,
Right.
which is the entire thing about the government special interest, is that, as Hazlitt said, if you put out a special interests call, then the people who it's giving to will get all the benefit and everyone else will be less off for it.
Now, there's one other.
Including the people who got the benefit.
Right.
The benefit will be, they're less off for it even with the benefit than they would with just, they're slightly better off, slightly. But the maximum value that I think they're going to get, they're not receiving because everyone else is also lesser for it.
One of the other flaws in that law was the fact that they gave a bureaucrat the ability to adjust the fees that were charged for that, not by law, but he could do it by his regulatory authority.
Technically, that we, the lawmakers, could just say it as law.
Yeah. Well, we've run out of time, Joe.
Yep.
We've done this, and good luck on your running, and I hope you get up there and try to convince some of the people about the things that your perspective is on all this. I think that has a good approach in some of those issues. So thank you for coming on, and well, good luck in your campaign.
I'd say good luck for your campaign, but you're not running.
Thank you. I've done that. I've done my duty, I guess, 4 times.
Yes.
I started in 2006. Anyway, thank you again for your time, and good luck.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.